long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and my friend hanging out in the basement lathing 500 wooden stakes is our old pal Matt Freeman. Matt, how's it going down there?
Oh, I'm ready to put our heads violently together and talk about vampires once again.
It's just way too soon, man. Way too soon.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, I've known that happened for like a year now. So
yeah, but you forgot.
Actually, I didn't forget that particular detail for some reason.
Interesting. This week on the show, we continue to make our way through Chapter 14 of Salem's Lot. It's finally time, Matt, for Callahan's big moment, the big moment we've been waiting for since we read Wolves of the Calla all those months ago. Matt, I gotta know, what did you think of this week's reading?
Oh, this is great. Been waiting for it, like you said. Somehow I think it made me feel emotional in ways that I don't think I would have felt emotional if I hadn't had the full story of Callahan in my mind, because it allows you to connect everything together. It was sort of like, it's like, it made me realize how much I'm going to enjoy rereading The Dark Tower, I think, is one thing that it did for me, which I've started doing, by the way.
Of course you have. How could you not? It's been too long.
I know. Well, I had to let some time pass and then get back to it, and then realize, like, yeah, it's as good as I thought it was.
And I've been enjoying the random messages that you're sending me about various parts of the Dark Tower as you get to them on your second read. Yeah.
And I realized things that I just didn't realize the first time.
Well, I guess we're just going to have to do the whole podcast again.
I know, because I mean, think about all these things that we just didn't get to talk about because
I know. And I was driving myself insane trying to come up with ways to talk about them without leading you right to conclusions.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got to do it all over again. Let's run it back.
Okay.
First, we got to finish this book. But before we do that, we have quite a few announcements, actually. So we're going to try to go through these as quickly as we can, but there's tons of things coming up. It's a big, big time here at Doof Media. So we've got lots of stuff to talk about.
We do.
The first thing is, if you are listening to this the day it came out, which is July 15th, today is the day for our Do the King Thing writing contest. This is it. This is the last day you can submit an entry. Entries are due tonight by 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So if you are listening to this on Thursday and they're like, shit, I hadn't submitted my story yet, there's still technically a few hours left. If you waited till Friday to listen to this, I'm sorry, you're too late. So make sure you get in those entries. You can check the show notes for all the rules and how to submit and everything. There's still time. So hopefully we'll see some entries pile in at the last minute, because that's when I would turn mine in for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the risk of repeating myself, the word count limit is pretty short. So give it a try. If you have an idea, if you have a horror story you've been kicking around, just bang it out and send it in.
Yeah, absolutely. So once those are all in, Matt and I will then have the arduous task of going through and reading all those and then figuring out how the hell we are going to get set up a poll for our patrons to vote on them, because we've got a lot of entries so far and they're not even done yet. So we've got to figure this out. Very, very happy with the response to this thing. So thank you all. Those of you that have already submitted and those of you that are going to be submitting today, thank you so much. It's amazing. It's awesome. But now the work is on us. So we've got to figure out how to do this.
Yeah. I can't wait to see, how this goes, how this rolls out. Mm-hmm. All right. Next announcement. This week, me and Scott are releasing another episode of our Patreon-only bonus podcast, Other Levels of the Tower. This week, we talked about The Shining, the Kubrick Shining, of course. And we found just all sorts of just completely unknown readings of that film.
Yeah, no one has ever talked about The Shining like we've talked about The Shining.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So if you want to check that out, that is one, as Matt said, one of our Patreon exclusive Other Levels of the Tower episodes. That is the 9th of this project we've been doing. So we're coming up on a year of doing these bonus episodes, which is crazy. So that means there are going to be 9 movies out there for you to listen to us talk about. Some of them good and some of them thinner.
Yep. We're nearly out of the King adaptations that I have seen. So maybe
I don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah, kind of revise our thing there. But we're not quite there yet. So.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to quickly announce here, we've been getting some questions via email and on Twitter about what we're going to cover and when. We're getting to the end of Salem's Lot. We'll be done with this book by the end of this month. And if you look at our schedule, it says we're going to be diving right into Insomnia after that. We're going to make some changes to that schedule a little bit here, Matt. The first thing is we've been getting a lot of questions. There are 2 short stories that are set in Salem's Lot. One of them is a prequel to the book we're reading right now, and one of them is a sequel to the book we're reading right now, of sorts. They are both in the Night Shift short story collection, and I've decided that we're going to do an episode on both those short stories. We're just going to do them both in one episode because it's Salem's Lot. How do we not talk about these short stories? So we're going to tack that onto the schedule. It will come out once we've done our overview episode, so probably not until August, but we're definitely going to cover those.
Awesome. I have first time hearing about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I should have told you about that first, huh?
No, it's kind of cool to know that these exist, though.
Yeah. And then we are going to cover the movie, the Tobe Hooper version. There are 2 versions of the movie that exist. We're going to cover the first one. The one that I think is the most iconic is the Tobe Hooper, which is actually, it's a made-for-TV movie. There were 2 episodes, but we're going to cover that in an episode, probably after we do the 2 short stories. So we will be doing that. And then that will be officially the end of our Salem's Lot coverage. We'll be done with Salem's Lot forever at that point.
Sounds good.
But we're still not going to jump right into Insomnia after that. We've decided that before we get into Insomnia, we're going to take a look at the Dark Tower comics, Matt. So I haven't quite worked out exactly how we're going to do this. There are 5 volumes of comics, but I'm not sure if we're going to divide them into 5 episodes. I'm not sure if there's enough content in each volume. So I'm going to be going through over the next few weeks and reading them myself. And then I'm going to kind of figure this out. And we're going to cover them in some way, but look forward to that. So that'll be before we get into Insomnia. We'll do that. Yeah.
And just to remind everyone, because I had forgotten, the Dark Tower comics have content that is from outside of the Dark Tower novels. So it's
correct. Yeah.
That's the main thing that makes me interested in it, actually, because if it was just kind of rehashing the Dark Tower novels, I would be less excited, but I am excited as it stands because I want to know more about this cool world that King made.
Yeah, and while King did not write them himself, he was involved in the project, and of course Robin Firth, who wrote the Dark Tower compendium and was a assistant of Stephen King for many years, is the one that wrote these novels. So while it is not King's story technically, it is about as close as you can possibly get. So I think they'll be, I've never read them, and I think they'll be fun to read and talk about in some way. So the schedule could change, but for now, that is the tentative plan. Just wanted to give y'all a heads up. And we, of course, will let you know if any schedule changes beyond that on these episodes, or you can follow us on Twitter at kingslingerspod. That's where we'll have all the latest news and stuff. So if you're curious about what we're covering and when, that's the place to find it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that is it for Salem's Lot scheduling stuff. I think we have one more quick announcement.
Done
and
with
I promise we'll talk about Salem's Lot.
Yes. We're done with subsection 2 of the announcements. Moving on to subsection 3. This week on the Doofcast, our other podcast, we are discussing, last week we discussed the video game God of War, the 2018 masterpiece. We really talk about video games, but I was like obsessed with it, and I kept talking to Scott about it, and he was like, let's do a Doofcast so you'll get it out of your goddamn system. So we did a Doofcast on that, and that was really fun. And then this week we did an episode on the Gore Verbinski film, animated computer CG film Rango.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a kind of like the Dark Tower, except it's a chameleon instead of Roland Deschain.
That's right. Exactly. That's it, because he's a gunslinger. Yeah.
Cool. And then one more quick announcement. We do have a book club, folks. We do have a book club. It meets every Friday. Not every Friday. It meets the final Friday of the month. Although I haven't officially announced this yet, Matt. Remind me that I have to. We're going to have to push this month's book club. So it will be on August 6th, Friday, August 6th. And we will be reading A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which is a science fiction novel. So if you want to participate in a book club outside of the Salem's Lot reading you're already doing, you can find a link to buy that book on our website, and then you can join us on the 6th of August at 9:30 p.m. over on our YouTube channel, and we will stream live our discussion about that book, and we can chat with you about it.
That's right.
It's so much fun. I love doing the book club. So if you've never participated before, it's a good month to do it. I think this is going to be a really fun book to read and to chat about.
Yeah, we really love the audience engagement we get there. So
100%. All right, we're done. We're done. Let's talk about Salem's Lot. But before we get into, no, I'm just kidding. Let's do it. Matt, we begin right where we left off. Chapter 14, the Lot 4, part 19. And we catch back up with Jimmy Cody rushing back into Matt's room to inform them that they've all fucked up. And Barlow already has the priest and the boy. Matt continues to be the wise old sage, pointing out something to us. Why the hell would Barlow cut the phone line? I was a little disappointed that you didn't pick up on this last week, Matt, that like, why cut the phone line? Why do that?
I mean, yeah.
Why is a vampire concerned about someone calling on a phone? And of course, what he says is here, I've no doubt he's a superb player of chess. Don't you realize that he could have done his work at the house without cutting the telephone line? He did it because he wants you to know one of the white's pieces is in check. He understands forces, and he understands that it becomes easier to conquer if the forces are split in confusion. You gave him the first move by default because you forgot. The original group was split in 2. If you go herring off to the Petrie's house, the group is split in 3. So it was all just they're just playing castles. Just playing castles or chess as it is known. Yeah, I mean, he's right. And good thing that they have this uniquely level-headed guy, and further good that they actually listen to him, right? Mm-hmm. Like I feel like in another dimension, this story doesn't have the Matt Burke character. And, I don't know how that works, right? Like it's really important to have a smart character. This is basically the chess master of their team. Yeah.
And I was also glad that we didn't have one of the characters, like for example Ben, go like, no, we have to do something, and like rush off to rescue Mark, because like I don't know, at a certain point, like I think it made sense that Susan kind of died pointlessly, due to a mistake, but like that's kind of the quota that we get for dying pointlessly due to a stupid mistake, I think.
Sure. Yeah, you do that too many times and you just kind of start rolling your eyes.
Yeah.
No, I think Matt Burke his role in the story is really interesting to me. I mean, he's like bedridden for most of the book, but he is a key player in this whole thing. And I agree that it's really nice to have someone kind of expose Barlow's games for us, the reader, as well as for these characters. And that's kind of what he's doing. I think I was kind of kidding at the beginning. I don't think you should have questioned why Barlow would cut the telephone line. But like once Matt Burke lays it out there for you, you're like, yeah, hey, you're right. You're totally right. He's a vampire.
Yeah. But I mean, it is really interesting to think that our vampire adversary, far from being someone who is, baffled and out of touch with technology, had the wherewithal to sever the phone line, knowing that it would cause the people calling the number to realize that the phone line was severed. Like that's a fairly sophisticated little, like not just, logically sophisticated, but technologically sophisticated trap that Barlow set up there. And I just think that's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, he's a smart, pointy-teethed boy.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But
that's just who he is.
I guess he went to night school.
God damn it. I hate you so much. Oh my God. He went to night school. I don't even know how to transition to this next point I wanted to make. But I found this part really interesting too, because like Matt Burke is kind of making his argument, and he says this: I'm not speaking out of fear for my life, Ben. You have to believe that. Not even for fear of your lives. I'm afraid for the town. No matter what else happens, someone must be left to stop him tomorrow. Yes, and he's not going to have me until I've had revenge for Susan. A silence fell among them. So this is really interesting because Matt is basically saying, I'm not telling you not to leave to keep me safe. I'm not telling you not to leave to keep you safe. I'm saying this for the good of the town. We are the only ones to fight this, and we have to do it. And Ben's response is, yeah, and I want revenge. Fuck the town. I mean, he doesn't say fuck the town, but he basically says fuck the town.
Yeah.
And it's like you can kind of start seeing how this is the guy that we saw at the very beginning of the novel that kind of fucked off to Mexico and left Salem's Lot to rot. Because we know they did not save the town, right? Like that's the interesting choice that King made at the beginning of this novel, is to kind of tell us that they left this town to be consumed by vampires. We don't exactly know how all that goes down, but we know that that's the finish line of whatever this counter against Barlow is.
Yeah. It's funny. This is the first time this is really fully landing for me, but Ben is obviously an outsider. Much has been made of the fact that Ben is an outsider, but I always forget that Mark is also an outsider. His family only recently arrived, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're new to town. Yes.
So the only two, as far as we know, the only two survivors are Mark and Ben. I'm sort of not counting Callahan because he sort of didn't survive in the sense
define survive.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's so the whole town really did die basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think the idea that Ben is in it for revenge specifically is really interesting, because this week we will see Callahan fail because of, to put it simply, his mindset. Mm-hmm. It's not tactic, it's not wits, it's his attitude, it's his motivation.
Sure.
And so it makes me a bit worried, actually, that Ben's mindset is revenge rather than something more of the white. Like, it seems like sort of an evil motive. And I wonder how that will play into how this unfolds.
Interesting. Yeah. We should definitely keep that in mind as we go through to the end of the book.
Sounds good.
All right. So this is it. We cut back to the Petrie house and we suddenly find ourselves in the scene that we read about all the way months and months ago in book 5 of The Dark Tower, Wolves of the Calla. Here it is again, Matt. I love how King brings us into this moment kind of in media res. Like, we start the scene with Callahan holding his cross aloft against Barlow, who has Mark Petrie in his grasp, and then Callahan looks at the camera and says, "You're probably wondering how I got in this situation," and then kind of recaps the events since we last left.
Yeah, I thought it was incredibly well written. I actually went back and listened to it a couple times because I just saw it as a perfect example, a perfectly executed instance of jumping into the middle of a complicated physical action scene and painting the scene and all the characters' complex positions and emotional states very quickly and efficiently in an exciting way. Like, yeah, I mean, we read a lot of books. I've read a lot of action scenes in my life, and like there's a tendency for them to become, like, the more complicated they become, the more stale, and sort of just like Bob was standing next to Bill, Jill was behind, and it's just like very, very, very boring. And King always, I think, does a great job at this, but this just struck me as kind of a particularly good instance of this.
I don't know, I just think this is the perfect way to make someone get the feeling of, oh my God, this all happened so quickly.
Yeah.
Is by you almost start after it's happened. And that, like, if this scene had played out in time, I don't think King would have been able to emphasize the speed at which this all went down. But because we see it in hindsight, I think that really helps emphasize that, oh my God, this is like, it was like instants, it was moments. And then we find ourselves in this Mexican standoff that will not end well for any of our characters.
Yeah. I think particularly because he kills the Petries before anyone could even possibly react. And so starting after that point does kind of make a sort of sense in terms of how you're processing things.
Yeah. And he kills them in such an vampiric way, right? You said you remembered this, but maybe it's because it's such a shocking moment where he smashes through the window, swoops in, and just smashes their heads together. Boom, done. They're dead. They had both dropped down like stones, and Barlow's first threat had been carried out, and it's just done. It's almost as if he was doing that for no other purpose other than, well, I promised Mark I was going to do this, so I have to do this. It's just such a mundane death of just like knocking people's heads together. I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem vampiric at all.
Yeah, right. There's not like there's no blood, right? I mean, I think that's the most interesting thing. In fact, I'm going to go full galaxy brain here. What if this is like a weakness of his, since it sort of has been lampshaded as a weakness, that if he sees blood, he sort of loses control of himself. Like, what if he had drawn their blood, then he would be like sort of compelled or thrown off, or at the very least his bloodlust would be invoked, and he would like get distracted and possibly give Callahan and Mark a chance to escape. So So he intentionally killed them in a bloodless way by just crushing their skulls, in order to, basically remain functional.
Interesting. I like that.
Makes a lot of sense now that I'm thinking about it. I'm not like, I also just like what you were saying about the fact that it's just sort of, it's like perfunctory, and it's not like this big dramatic show that you would think of. It's just, it shows how he can be efficient and undramatic when he needs to.
Yeah. And I think something that I see here in the notes that you noted, it's also against the rules, what he just did here.
Because he just jumps in without being invited in.
Yeah. Now I guess we can maybe nobody invited Barlow in.
Yeah. The only thing that the connection that I made maybe is like Mark invited Danny Glick in, as in the process of sort of tricking him, and maybe that invitation extends to all vampires. But that's a reach.
That way. Yeah, I don't think it works that way. I think it's just more likely that like this whole the rules of vampires extend only to a certain power level, and Barlow, being the main guy, is seemingly above a lot of these rules, which is terrifying in a way, because it's kind of the rules that make you feel any level of safe. And so like, is Garlic? We know for a fact the cross works on him.
Yeah.
Is Garlic going to work on him at all?
Right. Yeah. And it's all, it makes us feel less secure, because if he can do this, then like, why can't he just burst into the window of Matt's hospital room and, just gank as many people as he can?
Yeah.
Which I mean, you would think would be all of them. Like, what are they going to do against him? He's, super powered basically.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he doesn't want to, because he's having fun here. He's enjoying this whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is you as the reader are kind of torn between like, he's just playing he's playing cat and mouse with him, versus like, well, he is this fearful creature who has stayed alive this long by being cautious. So so I don't know.
Yeah, it's just really interesting to think about, because it makes him all the more terrifying. And I don't know, like, what does it mean? Like, can you stake him to death? Is that even going to work on Barlow? We don't know. It's just like, I don't know. There's a lot of fun that you can have here.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
But Callahan and Barlow are now facing each other in a Mexican standoff. It's black against white, Discordia against goodness. And in this moment, before we get into the actual standoff itself, Barlow reminds Callahan of someone. We see here, his face was strong and intelligent and handsome in a sharp, foreboding sort of way. Yet as the light shifted, it seemed almost effeminate. Where had he seen a face like that before? And it came to him, in this moment of the most extreme terror he had ever known. It was the face of Mr. Flip, his own personal boogeyman, the thing that hid in his closet during the days and came out after his mother closed the bedroom door. He was not allowed a nightlight. Both his mother and father had agreed that the way to conquer these childish fears was to face them, not toady to them. And every night when the door snicked shut and his mother's footsteps padded off down the hall, the closet door slid open a crack and he could sense, or actually see, the white face and burning eyes of Mr. Flip. And here he was again, out of the closet, staring over Mark's shoulder with his clown white face and glowing eyes and red, sensual lips. So once again here, this recurring motif of childhood fear, right? We have Ben with the moment in the Marston house. We have Matt and his walk home alone at night. We have Mark Petrie. He is a child, so his entire existence. And now we have Father Callahan. It's almost as if we're like doing something here, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what exactly, but yes. I mean, you could even say maybe that part of Callahan's motivation to become a priest of God and to fight capital E evil was to understand and face and conquer his own fear of, Mr. Flip and perhaps the greater darkness around him in the world. That childhood fear represents. And, okay, so here's another thing. Like, part of me wants to say, obviously, Mr. Flip isn't real. This is just baby Father Callahan hallucinating, like all kids sort of do. But like, this is the King verse, so like maybe he is. I mean, I suspect that he isn't. I suspect that, I'm almost tempted to see this as like maybe a borderline Shining thing, where it's like baby Callahan is psychically perceiving the evil that exists out in the universe, and his mind is giving it the form of a creature that lives in his closet that happens to match the form of the actual vampires that are out there in the world.
Sure.
I guess I know I'm kind of fumbling here, but it's like, on what level am I supposed to take Mr. Flip literally, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't I don't take it literally. To me, this is just King's long fascination in this novel with the concept of childhood fear and the way childhood fear rules us. And he almost like declares vampires as metaphor in this. Like the idea that Barlow, under a certain light at a certain turn of his face, looks exactly like this childhood fear, says, look, vampires are just metaphor for childhood trauma or childhood fear, or these things that occurred when you were younger that you've never really been able to get over. And I mean, it's very clever in the way it does that, but it's just so fascinating to me that like we just keep, this is one of the things, honestly, that I never really paid attention to in all the times I've read this book. This just recurring beat of childhood, of the importance of childhood and childhood fear, is something that is really, really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't read a ton of horror novels, but as far as I remember, this is the only place where I've really seen it, not just portrayed, but taken seriously. Didn't King have, didn't King have young kids at around the time he was writing this? Is that?
Yes, he would have.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Because it strikes me that, that probably worked its way into here somehow. Like his kids being scared of the dark and him thinking like that's, maybe causing him to remember.
And he worked his childhood fear into this story. I mean, I think at the beginning of the book, I told the story of that he had this horrible dream of seeing a man hanging in a barn. And that is, he put that on Ben Mears. Like the Ben Mears the thing he sees in the Marston house, the Marston hanging from the rafters in the second floor of the house, is kind of King's transplanted childhood nightmare that he just continuously thought about. And so I think a lot of the story is kind of the reckoning with the capital E evil, but also the fear that rules childhood. And this is something, by the way, that I think he really discusses and explores in more detail and frankly better in some later books of his.
Cool. All right. Can't wait.
So our fight is at a standstill, and Barlow challenges Callahan exactly where he is the weakest in his faith. He says, softly, almost purring, Barlow said, then will you throw away your cross and face me on even terms, black against white, your faith against mine? Yes, Callahan said, but a trifle less firmly. So here, Matt, and what should be no surprise to you, because we've read this part already, the crux of the issue here is faith, and the totems and symbols we put our faith in. To demonstrate his absolute faith in himself and his abilities, Barlow folds his hand, releasing Mark Petrie, and so he has nothing. He basically throws his gun on the floor and saying, let's fight, like fight me like a man.
Yeah.
And then, of course, so this is how Mark Petrie gets out of there alive. And before we go on to Callahan, I just want to pause here at Mark Petrie's reaction to this event, which is like Barlow's making threats and Mark spits on him. And it's an act that is so shocking to Barlow that he almost loses it. He almost loses his confident cool, his ego almost like completely crumbles, and he's just like shuddering with rage. And it's really, really wonderful. And I was curious what you made of that.
Yeah, I think just Barlow is this exceedingly prideful, vain, selfish creature. And I think it's important to him that he be afforded the proper quota of, terrorized respect. And, you don't spit on somebody that you have respect for, or that you're scared of. So the fact that this offends him so much, I think does reveal a lot about, what's going on with him underneath this genteel surface that he presents. Yeah.
No, I think you're spot on there.
It reminds me a little bit, and I don't know if I can say why exactly, but it reminds me a little bit of Walter O'Dim looking wounded when Callahan calls him cruel at the way station. If that's actually where that happens, I think it is.
It is, yeah.
I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what the connection is there. It's just like the sort of the monstrous character revealing. I guess it's as simple as the monstrous characters revealing something about the way they really see themselves when someone lashes out at them in an unusual way.
Yeah, I think they have this obvious image that they've built up of themselves, and you kind of shockingly rip down that image when you defy them in those specific kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, like spit is such a defiance. It's a defiance of status too. You don't spit on nobility, on royalty.
Right.
Like it's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, there was one little line thrown into this this sort of build up to the standoff where I believe the text says something like, if Callahan had done it right away, he might have still beaten the creature in this moment, but he didn't.
Yeah, Barlow actually says that. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he says, if you had cast the cross away, you should have beaten me another night.
But okay, I thought the text itself said something like he could have vanquished the vampire on the spot if he had pushed forward at this moment, but he didn't, and thus blah blah blah. I don't know. I remember it as being more of a narration moment, but maybe I'm just totally misremembering. But whatever.
Possible. Yeah. I'm not sure. But he doesn't though. So he's told to throw his cross down, and what does Callahan do? He stood indecisive. Why throw it down? Drive him off. Settle for a draw tonight and tomorrow. But a deeper part of his mind warned. To deny the vampire's challenge was to risk possibilities far graver than any he had considered. If he dared not throw the cross aside, it would be as much as admitting what? If only things weren't going so fast. If only he had time to think, to reason it out. The cross's glow was dying. So yeah, as his doubts manifest themselves, the power of the white abandons him. And I want to talk about this a bit here, because the white, as we understand it in King's universe, and God are, I think, simultaneously the same thing while also being extremely different things, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think if you look at this at just from the Catholic Christian view, then you have a God here who is all-knowing, all-seeing, and is observing your faith fail, and then kind of just goes, okay, well then fuck you. Maybe not quite specifically like that. The Christians listening are going to be like, you just said God said fuck you. No. But basically, like, okay, you don't have faith in me, so you don't get my gifts, basically. Like, this is the power that I am granting you through this cross to protect yourself and to vanquish evil. I take it back. I pull it back out of you. You are not my agent anymore, and therefore that power is no longer yours. But the white isn't an entity. It's a concept. It's a thing. It's goodness. Mm-hmm. And so it's not as if the white is looking at Callahan and going, you stupid son of a bitch. Uh-huh. It's just the entity, or the concept that is the white is belief, is faith, is goodness, is like this idea made manifest into power itself, right? And it doesn't need a cross because it's just a symbol. It just needs belief. He is creating the white in a way by believing in it.
Right. Well, by believing in the right thing, or see, I'm not really too sure, because you're right. I think you're spot on that the idea of faith being so important is a very Christian idea. Mm-hmm. Faith is much less important in many other religions, on real religions that exist, where certain religions you can be borderline atheist and still be considered part of the religion, because who doesn't have doubts from time to time, etc. But the Catholicism, I don't think permits that, and I think that, okay, this is my take, and I don't know, tell me if this is distinct from yours or not, but my take is that Callahan is that, the Catholic doctrine, and particularly Callahan's interpretation of the Catholic doctrine, overlaps with what the white is, but not completely. And so as his faith starts to wane, it's like his connection with and ability to tap into the white wanes, because he's no longer even accessing that part of himself that understands what the white is. He's like retreating away from the white, and then kind of clinging on to some vestige of Catholic doctrine specifically that is just has very little to do with the white. Like the cross itself is just a cross that he's using to channel the white through. But when he starts to fixate on the cross, that's to the exclusion of the white. Does any of this make sense to you?
Yeah, no, I think that I think we align. I think the only thing that I would say differently is, in me, it's almost not even that he's tapping into the white, is that he's literally manifesting it. Mm-hmm. Like, just the idea that the concept of the white, to me, and our listeners might disagree with me on this a little bit, is it's goodness and everything good happening, and it requires, like, you create it every time you believe in, and you have faith and you have strength in the right thing and goodness and your ability to conquer evil and discordia. He's not tapping into something as he just is it. He just is it. And so as soon as you let that faith wane, it just doesn't exist anymore. It's not like you've severed your connection to it. It stops existing. And I
like that. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think he's very confused. It's so funny because he's very confused about Christianity as well. Like, I think a modern Christian would take what you said about, like, if you're ever indecisive or you have struggling faith, a modern Christian would say, like, no, you're still welcome in Christianity. But, like, I think the Old Testament-esque kind of Christianity that Callahan wants it to be is one that is much less forgiving of that kind of lack of faith or that kind of doubt. And so it's almost like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like he wanted this kind of church. Well, this kind of church punishes the shit out of you if you stop believing even for a moment. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here.
Yeah. And that, like you said, thus he stops manifesting the white.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I love how that's written. It would be so much as admitting what, and that's just great, because it's like this perfect setup to this moment that King doesn't even realize he's setting up for, really, but it's the realization that Callahan eventually has about what he would be admitting. He would be admitting that the symbol isn't actually what's important. Or yeah.
And it's not the problem. My faith is not the problem. It's the booze. It's all the booze. Yeah. And I mean, whenever a vampire is better at theological theory than a priest, you're in bad shape here, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, Barlow's like, you forgot the doctrine of your own church: the cross, the bread, the wine, the confessional, only symbols. Without faith, the cross is only wood. And this is something that the book has kind of set up really nicely too, like the two tongue depressors being made into a cross. Well, what is that? There's nothing to do with the symbol. It's just a way to channel a power. It's a way to focus your belief and your goodness on something.
Yeah.
And the second you hold too closely to that, and it's hilarious that now you see that was always Callahan's arc, and it took him decades to get there, to finally understand this fact that Barlow lays out for him very clearly here in this moment.
Yeah. It's so good.
But of course, as we know, instead of killing the poor false priest, Barlow does something even more cruel, but ultimately more redeeming, because it gives him a chance at redemption. He slices his own neck and forces Callahan to drink his tainted vampire blood.
I actually forgot this happened.
Oh, really?
I remembered other weird details, but forgot this happened. But then as soon as it happened, I remembered, like, oh yeah, this makes sense of why Callahan would flee the way he does. It's such a more interesting thing to do with his character than to just kill him,
Yeah.
Take the priest who wants to fight evil and make him drink the tainted vampire blood, and then, you know, basically we show that, like, you sort of feel like if Callahan really had faith, then he could sort of shake it off, you know. But he doesn't, and thus he lives, like you said, decades of kind of struggling with this.
Yeah, I mean, we'll circle back around to him a couple more times before this chapter is done and before he exits the book. But yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting choice, and obviously, I don't think when King left this like this, he thought, I'm going to come back to this in 30 years and see and finish the story of Callahan. Right. I don't think that's what he was thinking, but it does leave him in a very interesting place.
Yeah.
But from here, we cut away. Actually, before we cut away, what was your overall thought on the scene? This was kind of the big one, right? This is the thing. This is the reason we're reading this book, is the scene that just happened right here. And just overall, like, did it play exactly like you were expecting? Was there anything super surprising that came out of it?
I guess I don't think there was anything super surprising. There were details that I didn't expect to see, like Mark spitting at him, and I've been so curious to see it, you know, like, it's been sitting in my mind as like this thing where, like, oh, I want to understand the context surrounding this. How do they end up here? And you know, and how does Mark Petrie get away exactly? And where does he go after that? And, you know, what, and then of course I want to know, like, what happens to this vampire, which we don't actually know yet because we haven't finished.
So did it meet your expectations in that regard? I mean,
I think it met my expectations in every way. I think it exceeded my expectations in terms of, like, just being a great scene. It is just a great scene. It's probably, out of all the scenes in this book so far, I think it's just, like, iconic to me, as, you know, it's the one I'm going to always sort of remember as being emblematic of this book.
Sure.
It's just a cool idea. I mean, there's so much, there's like even more we could talk about, is the thing. Like, the idea that Barlow makes him drink his blood is tied in with the idea that Callahan is an alcoholic and his problem is drinking. Yeah. And it's such a wonderful, horrible, ironic punishment for Barlow to make him drink, you know, the vampire blood, which is, you know, metaphorically alcohol. And
it's poison. He's drinking poison.
It's poison. And the curse is actually not that he becomes a vampire that drinks blood. It's the curse is that he becomes a wandering alcoholic for decades. Right. Like, it's so good. It's so clever and, like, powerful. Like, it really works really well on me. Love the scene.
I love it too. I mean, it's probably just because of Wolves of the Calla, but this is the scene I think about when I think of Salem's Lot. I think of two scenes. I think of this one, and I think of the Mark Petrie, Danny Glick, like, bedroom scene. And that's only because of the movie, because when I watched that scene in the movie, it scared the shit out of me. Awesome. It's one of the most iconic scenes from the film. But yeah, I mean, I really like it too. There is a part of me that wonders, I kind of wish Callahan was more of a focus in this book from the beginning. Like, he's definitely a character, and he's definitely part of our quartet, but he's kind of just around he's not around at all for the beginning of the book, and he kind of just shows up in a few moments. And I wonder what this would have looked like if he was more of the focus of the book.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a good question. Do you have any thoughts on that? Any suggestions?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to save my, like, here are my complaints about Salem's Lot for our overview episode, because I do have some complaints about this book, some of which some of our listeners are going to get into today in today's discussion question. But so I'm trying to save those for that. But no, I mean, I think, as you probably did, I think if you go from Wolves of the Calla into this, you kind of make the assumption that Salem's Lot is about Father Callahan, and it's just really not. And I love the scene. It's an iconic scene. I love what it says, but it's a small part of this overall book. Like, the idea of a priest struggling with his faith and what happens to him is just, like, a very small part of this very long book. Yeah. So.
Right. I mean, there's just so many characters. Like, I think that's ultimately what it is. And I don't even see that as a problem. It's just like, that's the cost of that, is you don't get to focus as much maybe on some of these characters that you wanted to.
Yeah, we will resume this conversation in a couple weeks because I have some things to say.
Sounds good.
All right, let's move on. And we cut from the scene over to, strangely enough, Anne Norton, who is heading to the hospital. We learn under Barlow's orders because he's slowly transforming her into a vampire and has ordered her to kill Matt Burke. Her plan is foiled, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which side you're on, thanks to a late game assist by a young boy that informs a random man that woman that just walked into the hospital is carrying a loaded gun. I mean, we can assume this is Mark Petrie in this moment, right? But we're never told it's Mark Petrie.
It's funny because how does he know she has a loaded gun? I mean, I guess
I don't know.
I
guess he saw it as he just happened to walk into the parking lot at the same time she was putting the gun into her purse. That's the white right there, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's and furthermore that he had the presence of mind to both notice that and then take the appropriate action while still reeling from the murder of his parents 5 minutes ago. So yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like Mark Petrie's whole deal, right? Like we've talked about his hyper competence, and I kind of love he is losing his shit from the trauma that happened. But I just listen to this. Barlow caught me, killed my folks. They're dead. My folks are dead. He beat their heads together. He killed my folks. Then he had me, and he said to Father Callahan that he would let me go if Father Callahan would promise to throw away his cross. He promised. I ran. But before I ran, I spit on him. And I'm going to kill him. Like you can almost see his mind turn as he's saying that stuff. Like he gets from frantic to focused in the course of 5 sentences. And he's just he finds his strength immediately. Yeah. And I think it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. I think it's, the main core likable element of his character is he's just this unflappable. He's a kid. There's a lot about him that's childish, but the core of him is definitely not childish.
Yeah. And of course, what it does is it aligns two of our characters, right? Both Ben Mears and Mark Petrie now have been personally harmed by Barlow. They've lost someone specific to them, someone close to them, to Barlow, and now they both want revenge on Barlow. So again, you can kind of maybe start to see, oh, these are why these two say fuck you to Salem's Lot and head out, because all they don't want to save the town. They just want revenge. And so hypothetically, if they get their revenge on Barlow, well, we don't need to clean up the rest of these vampires.
Yeah. They're just not attached to it in the same way as the other characters are. And especially if our other beloved Quartet members were to die, they would have very little holding them here. As I mentioned earlier, I wonder if it won't turn out to be somehow, bad that their motivations are revenge. Maybe the reason that Barlow targeted Mark's parents and killed them in front of him, instead of, for example, just killing Mark immediately, right? Because if Barlow can just go right through the window, grab two human beings and smash their heads together, then why didn't he just pancake Mark into the floor of the kitchen before doing that? I think he could have, right? I think he wants to break Mark is the thing. I think he wants to torture these people.
I think he wants to have Mark. I mean, he wants to break him, absolutely, and then he wants to make him his slave. I mean, that's kind of exactly what he said in his note. He killing him would be too easy. He wants this kid that took something away from him to be under his thrall, and that's what he wants. And part of that process is completely destroying him first.
Yeah, right. I think that's right. I think part of his chess game against these people is make them just go berserk with anger and desire for revenge, because then they won't be able to think clearly.
Yeah, and they'll behave recklessly, for example, seeing a coffin-like thing and then just punching the shit out of it until you bleed or something, right. Just hypothetically.
For example.
I mean, maybe this is why his reaction to the spit, on top of what we've already talked about, is so strong, because in Barlow's mind, he killed his parents specifically to break this boy, and the boy's reaction is defiance, is to spit on him. And so, it becomes this very specific, oh, I failed. The opposite of what I wanted is happening. Yeah.
The boy is even stronger than I thought he was, which is, he basically says, the boy is worth 10 of you, false priest. It's he is actually.
I do also want to talk about, now that we've kind of aligned Ben and Mark really closely here, I want to talk about, like, we talked earlier in the book about how Ben is basically Stephen King. I made a joke about that, but Mark is basically Stephen King as a boy. Like, this is not very subtle in that, like, his obsession with monster movies and books and stories and stuff. And I look at both of these characters as like two different idealized versions of Stephen King. And I do think this is very symptomatic of a young writer, that you just make your protagonist you, but like the best version of yourself. And I think that's what we see in both Ben and Mark. Ben is the best version of adult Stephen King. Mark is the best version of Stephen King as a child.
Yeah, right. I mean, I feel like this is a thing that we end up talking about regarding a lot of books and like book club books and stuff, where there's this incredibly thin line between like having a character who is formidable and likable versus like overly badass, and thus you roll your eyes.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that King crosses that line here, because I think that Mark and Ben are both good, strong characters, but I definitely think this is a symptom of him being so early in his career, that maybe he, like, for example, think about Eddie Dean. Eddie Dean is an incredible badass, and so is Roland for that matter. Yeah. But we never really like roll our eyes at them because they're both very flawed.
Yeah, Eddie Dean is a giant fuck up. He's just also a incredible badass.
They have obvious weaknesses that are front and center. And it compensates. And it's like, what's Ben's weakness? Well, he's an alcoholic. Okay, does that ever really cost him anything?
It doesn't really ever come up, because in the Stephen King head of this is an idealized version of myself, I haven't yet admitted that I have a drinking problem.
I mean, Ben, we just I don't know if I'm critiquing the book or what, but it's like he stopped being an alcoholic as soon as things started going bad.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, like, this is totally unfair, and I'm not even sure I want to do it. I might walk this back the second I say it, but like, I wonder if he even really wanted us to think of him as an alcoholic, or he was just describing his drinking process as just a thing that I do every night, and I haven't really thought about it more than that.
This is what writers do. They drink a case of beer while they're writing their book.
I mean, I say that, and then, of course, like, the moment where Susan's mother accuses him of being drunk when his wife dies, it seems like that is meant to pick at his drinking problem a little more. So I don't know if that's necessarily true, and I think I'm being a little uncharitable to Mr. King here. But
I mean, just to devil's advocate, like you said, we don't really have any evidence that he was drunk when his wife died. So we're just left with a kind of a confusion and a question mark. So yeah,
but just the fact that the book is introducing the question of it seems to be we're meant to pay more attention to his drinking than we would have otherwise.
Yes.
Like, if that never came up, then like his excessive consumption of alcohol would not have been a thing outside of us talking about it. Like, it would have just been the narrator mentions it and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately King wouldn't mention alcohol so many times and give Callahan a drinking problem too if he didn't intend for that to be a thing.
That's kind of but I don't know. It just feels like Callahan is the drinking problem character in this. It's not Ben. Like, I don't know. Like, spoilers for the conversation I'm going to have in 2 weeks. I don't think Ben's that great of a character. I think he's one of King's weakest protagonists, honestly. And I think a lot of the stuff where a lot of the, not confusion, but I think at times throughout the course of this book, you and I have like struggled to pull out a clear thesis on who he is, and I think it's because he's just not that good of a character.
He's not somebody who's going to stick with me. I feel. This is kind of an aside, but also related. Is like something that it took me a really, really long time to learn in my writing is that to make a character feel like the right level of flawed, you have to make them like cartoonishly flawed. You know what I mean? Like you have to. You always got to go bigger than you think. You have to go so they're not just like, have an addictive personality. Make them an actual heroin addict, and then it feels, okay, I know where we are on the map.
Sure.
Like that's just I don't know what to call it, a rule of thumb or a lesson that I've learned, but Yeah, I mean, I'm like, this is a great book, and I love it. I just think there's a couple things here and there where I kind of sense that this is his, his second book, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to seem like I don't like the book, but I love the book. But yeah, there's definitely some. It feels like new writer stuff going on.
Yeah.
All right, where were we? Gosh, we went on a whole big tangent.
We were talking about Callahan leaving.
Yeah, we cut back to Callahan, who is kind of staggering around Salem's lot alone at night. He knows. I love the realization that he's safe, that no vampire will get him because he's been marked. So he's fine. He's totally safe. He attempts to go back to his church, and he figures out the solution to his problem. Matt, here's the solution. He would pray all night if necessary, not to the new God, the God of ghettos and social conscience and free lunches, but the old God who had proclaimed through Moses not to suffer a witch to live, and who had given it unto his own son to raise from the dead. A second chance, God. All my life for penance. Only a second chance. But the God he's praying to says, wow, okay, Donald, you really just don't get it at all, do you? And so he responds to this by bearing him from entering the holy place. He puts his hand on the door of the church, and it is immediately burned. And he says, unclean, unclean, unclean. It's hilarious how little Callahan has learned in this moment, right? Like the idea that after all the things he experiences, he says, here's what I'll do. I'll just pray. But not to to my version of God. I like this one better. Yeah.
You know what's great about this paragraph you just read? It's sort of like just clicked on some things just now as you were reading it. The first of them, of course, is that I think the white probably has a lot more to do with taking care of people than, sacrificing, for God, and not suffering which to live. And so like and so when he tries to go into the church, the church, which sort of here is standing in for the white, is like, nope, like you're not, like you're not even close. And then the second thing is he says, please, I just want a second chance. I'll do anything for a second chance. Okay. Yeah. This is the white saying, yeah, but you're not going to get your second chance from coming into this building and praying. No. Your second chance is going to be out there. You are now a vampire hunter, kid.
Yeah. Hit the road, Jack. Yeah.
Hit the road. You got a lot of work to do. Here's your second chance. Get to it.
Yeah. I think you're totally right there. I mean, this is kind of the Lord works in mysterious ways type thing, right? Like your penance and your second chance is not going to come the way you think it is. I think you're totally right. And I mean, that's a great read, because I don't know if King meant that when he wrote it, because again, like I don't think he had a plan at all for what he was going to do with Callahan, but under what we've seen of Callahan's second chance, that meaning is created here. And I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I think your first point is totally right. Like this idea that the idea that the white doesn't care about social conscience or ghettos, or like the white stands for goodness and hope and coincidence is the wrong word, but like just things working out and things happening. And like is the white cool with child beating? Probably not. you know, like it's the embodiment of goodness. And even at the end of this thing, after testing his faith against a vampire and losing, all he can think about is his image of the church, his image of God, his image of the power that the church has. It's like, no, you were wrong about that power. Look, you were wrong about it. And he still doesn't get it.
Yep. Now I'm remembering, paralleling this moment to him going into the Dixie Pig with Jake, who is another hyper competent kid of about this age. And it's just really going to enjoy getting back to that and kind of connecting all these things together in my mind, I think.
Well, yeah. What does he channel his power through in the Dixie Pig? It's not his cross.
I think it's the Skulled Pata, which he then just throws away because he's like, I don't need this anymore, basically.
Yeah,
right?
But doesn't it? Isn't just this is shameful considering we talked about this book for like 3 months. But isn't it just like his hands? Doesn't he just like channel? Isn't it his hands that glow?
I think eventually it is. I mean, I think he starts out using the Skulled Pata, and I think God, I don't really remember. I think one of the vampires is like tries to do this same test of faith with him, and he just casually tosses the skull pot aside, and it tumbles off into the darkness, and you never see it again because he doesn't need it and it doesn't matter. And he basically he passes the test that time, is my recollection.
Yes. I mean, I think it is built to be a recreation of the scene. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And except this time he does the right thing and dies for it, which is just like God, right? Like, yes, you've proven your faith in me. Now you're dead.
Oh dear.
All right, so back at our hospital, our Van Helsing stand-in outlines his plan. The town needs to be saved. And to do this, they'll need to make a whole lot of stakes. 300 at least, probably better, closer to 500, and then go around the entire town during the daylight tomorrow and slay just a lot of vampires. And in the back of your mind while you're reading this, you may be remembering how much of a process it was to kill one vampire and to have to do this 300 times.
And I'm also thinking like he'd probably reuse some of these stakes, right?
No, you gotta it disintegrates when you do it.
Oh shit.
I don't think that's true, but I think you have to leave it in there. I think like you literally pound it in and you leave the stake in the heart, I think is actually how it works.
Okay. Well, that's probably the safe way to do it for sure.
Yeah. Everyone else is like immediately doubtful of this plan. They're like, there's way too many fucking vampires out there. We can't do this. We'll never be able to find them all. Blah, blah, blah. But Matt is totally gung-ho. This is the way. This is the only way. And he's so into this that he says there is every possibility that some of us or all of us may live and triumph only to stand trial for murder.
It's very optimistic of you, Matt.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. Like, people are going to have questions. You just go around knocking on people's doors and hammering wooden stakes into them.
Yeah. I think this is really interesting. I think we'll talk about this probably off and on throughout the rest of this conversation. Just the idea that Matt has been locked up this whole time in the hospital, and he really lacks the sense of what it's like out there.
Yeah.
And they all have that sense. And then, as the rest of this chapter is kind of them going out and increasingly realizing that this isn't gonna work. Nobody has a better plan, and so they all just kind of silently go along with it. But I think they're going along with it out of a kind of hope that they'll find some better option.
Yeah, and I think all that they care about is killing Barlow. So they'll go along with this plan if it allows them to locate Barlow and take him out, because that's what Mark wants. That's what Ben wants. And Jimmy Cody's just kind of there. Right.
Maybe this is one of those vampire stories where all the vampires die when you stake the head vampire.
That certainly would be convenient. Right. Yeah.
Which, I think it's probably not, but you could hope, right?
Yeah. They do say that they need to find where Barlow's at. That's the big thing preventing them from killing Barlow, is they don't know where he's holed up. So they kind of interrogate Mark Petrie, and the only bit of clue they get to his whereabouts are he had blue chalk on his fingers. Blue chalk. They discuss the possibility of it being at a school, but no one really seems convinced. And by the end of this week's reading, of course, Cody will have put everything together and realized that this is blue chalk from billiards, from pool. And I'm wondering in this moment if you guessed this.
Not at all.
Or not.
No. Nope. No. In fact, I was so overly attached to the idea that Barlow's in the basement of the hotel, that I was like, maybe they use some kind of blue chalk to mark the dry goods for some reason. Yeah, no, I didn't figure it out. So.
Okay. Just curious, because I don't remember what my thoughts were first time, but I think King kind of has fun with the slow realization of pool.
Yeah, he definitely gives you a few hints before he tells you.
Yeah. So we then cut over to Miss Coogan sitting alone in her store reading a story called I Tried to Strangle Our Baby, when who enters her store but our boy, Father Callahan. He's changed out of his priest gear, Matt, and now wearing none other than a blue chambray work shirt, predicting his eventual shift into a gunslinger, of course. That's definitely what King meant there. Not yet, though. Right now, former Father Donald Callahan is not doing well, and he's dealing with his problem by running away. He buys a ticket to New York, and then we get this is the biggest pity party moment in the book. He stuffed the ticket into his breast pocket. Without looking at her, he said, "And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, that whosoever found him should not kill him. And Cain went out from the face of the Lord and dwelt as a fugitive on the earth at the east side of Eden." That's scripture, Miss Coogan. The hardest scripture in the Bible. And I'm just like, wah, I'm Cain now. Look, I'm so...
Yeah.
Jesus, Donald.
I'm marked. Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely... You're not supposed to like him, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just giving up and running away.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And this is the guy who wanted to fight evil.
All his life he wanted to fight evil. He comes up against evil one time, he fails, and then he's just like, "Oh, I'm unclean. I've been marked. I am Cain, and I wear his mark." And
yeah, I think it's funny how. It's funny how like this sort of character in fiction, like you see this kind of thing in fiction sometimes, and it's always like a person who is so like self-obsessed that they forget that the basic tenet of Christianity is selflessness.
Yeah.
It's like shut the fuck up. Like you're just so focused on yourself and your own role and everything. Like you've already got it all wrong.
Yeah. Hey, Father, is Mark Petrie okay?
Yeah.
Did you check? Did you check if Mark Petrie's okay?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe Barlow's vampires are waiting outside, and so when he ran off, did you check on that?
No. He's got to deal with his own problems.
Yeah.
Like usual. Yeah.
Yeah. It is also an interesting like way of take like a person who is very knowledgeable of the Bible, but like just interprets everything in a way that makes them the victim, like it's just like, like he's both being self-deprecating and also victimizing himself at the same time. Like it's just so exhausting.
It's always vaguely ridiculous to like quote scripture and then be like, yeah, that's about me and my problems.
Yeah.
I also really want to talk about the little touch of Miss Coogan's magazine.
Okay.
Full of terrible sordid shit.
Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, nowadays, this is what massive parts of the internet are. Just basically a way to ogle other people's failings and confessions to horrible things. But I just thought it fits so well in this cynical painting of small town Americana that, she's sitting there waiting for the kids to come in so she can pour them Coke floats and such. And she's privately reading about horrible things for her entertainment. And it's just, I don't know. I just find it to be such a piece of the way King has consistently portrayed this town, where it's like everything is banana splits and gingham on the surface, and underneath everybody's just kind of terrible people, basically.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there. I like that a lot. It's like this beautiful picturesque image of what America is. Meanwhile, we're reading about terrible things that we do. And of course, like the "I tried to strangle our baby" thing is channeling the McDougalls, right? Like we haven't talked about them in a while, where there is a brief section with them coming up here. But that is something that was happening in this very town, that this woman was abusing her baby in this very town. Mm-hmm. And then now we have a woman not doing anything, just sitting there reading about that kind of thing. Yeah. For entertainment is the thing. Like, But anyway, that's a good connection. Yeah. I like that. King then chooses to kind of step back again, and we get a series of vignettes about the vampires kind of taking over even more so than before. First, we head over to Charlie Rhodes, the Vietnam vet and bus driver and complete asshole, wakes up to a bunch of damn kids on his bus, vampire kids. And this scene, I think, is really terrifying, actually. Like, I love this. The tennis racket slid from his hand. There was a wheeze and a thump as Richie Bodden, still smiling that crazy smile, worked the chrome lever and shut the folding door. They were getting out of their seats now. All of them. "No," he said, trying to smile. "You kids, you don't understand. It's me. It's Charlie Rhodes. You. He grinned at them without meaning, shook his head, held out his hands to show them they were just old Charlie Rhodes' hands, blameless, and backed up until his back was jammed against the wide, tinted glass of the windshield. "Don't," he whispered. They came on, grinning. Spooky kids, man. Spooky kids get me.
It's fucking great. This whole part, I was so glad we're finally here. You know, the part of the vampire novel where you know, this sequence happens where the vampires pick off all of these various characters who you've set up, especially the ones who you don't really like Charlie Rhodes.
Yeah. You just kind of get to see them all get their comeuppance, but at the same time, it just means more problems for our heroes, right? Because every one of these people that falls is another person they have to fight.
Of course, yeah.
And then it's Anne Norton's turn to die, and then we get this really sad moment, Matt, where Eva Miller is woken up by poor old vampire Weasel. She finds herself wanting him because vampires, as we know, are horny. Mm-hmm. But instead, they have to do work for Mr. Barlow, and we get this moment. She glanced into the mirror and saw only her bedroom reflected, empty and still. The attic door was locked, and the key was in the bottom drawer of the dresser, but it didn't matter. No need for keys now. And so, Eva and Weasel, together.
Yeah, it's a happy ending for the happy couple after all.
Sure, Matt, sure. Very, very happy ending.
Yeah, they get what they wanted. I mean, yeah, it's actually great. Like, it's a great kind of cynical, you know, darkly ironic twist on the setup, right?
Sure.
The setup is they really want to be together, but you know, fate stands in their way, and then it's like, well, now they get to be together forever, but you know, they're vampires. So.
Yeah. And as for the rest of Salem's Lot, well, they're leaving their lights on and locking their doors. And I love this section here. It's a little long, but I really want to read it. Here's the peculiar thing. None of those awake in Jerusalem's Lot knew the truth. A handful might have suspected, but even their suspicions were as vague and unformed as 3-month fetuses. Yet they had gone unhesitatingly to bureau drawers, attic boxes, or bedroom jewelry collections to find whatever religious hex symbols they might possess. They did this without thinking, the way a man driving a long distance alone will sing without knowing he sings. They walked slowly from room to room as if their bodies had become glassy and fragile, and they turned on all the lights, and they did not look out the windows. That, above all else, they did not look out their windows. No matter what noises or dreadful possibilities, no matter how awful the unknown, there was an even worse thing, to look the Gorgon in the face. Man, that's some good writing right there.
Yeah, that's great. I like this. I think it touches on how I think King wants to show the white operating, because like the white isn't leaving these people unprotected. The white maybe is actually the stirring within these people to protect themselves using their symbols of goodness. I know we talked about the white quite a bit already, but I just thought this was kind of an interesting, because it does seem supernatural the way they're, you know, unerringly and even sort of automatically going to these symbols.
Yeah, I like that. I had a little bit of a different interpretation.
Okay.
So I kind of want to talk about something that happened to me this Sunday, because I thought it was really interesting, and it kind of led me down a train of thought. Sunday was my wife's birthday, and so I woke up a little earlier than she did and went to get her breakfast, and then I picked up some coffee from Starbucks. And so it was like 7:30 in the morning, and I was at Starbucks, and there was a priest at the Starbucks, like a Catholic priest. He was like in full like regalia with the collar and everything, and he was sitting there presumably preparing his service for later that day. And a woman walked up to him and just started having this casual chat with this priest. I don't think they knew each other, but she was probably Catholic and saw a Catholic priest and said, "Hey, let's talk." So they talked, and I got to thinking about small towns, and I got to thinking about, I've never lived in a small town. And there's always something that I think, for those of us who have not lived in a small town, I've lived in suburbs basically my entire life. This idea of, you would go to the local coffee place on a Sunday morning, and everyone in that store would be someone you know. Like, you'd see the local priest there getting his coffee, preparing for the sermon. You'd know the woman talking to him. Everyone would know each other. And this feeling, this creation of community that would happen because everyone knows each other. And this feeling of, we're all in this together, where we know each other. It's this idea, an idealized version of a small town. And I think what King is doing with this book, and maybe even more specifically this section of this book, is explaining how, no, maybe there is that, but also there's things so much worse than that. There is these people that all know each other, but don't want to deal with anything. Like they're putting on these powerful devices because they know that there's something bad out there. They know that the McDougals are abusing their kids. They know that these people are cheating. They know that this guy's a drunk. They know that this guy's a murderer. They know that this stuff is going on. They know about all these evil things that are happening in their town. They know about them because everybody knows everyone, but they don't want to do anything about them because to face those terrible things would be worse than the terrible things themselves. And so I know about all these things. I will protect myself from these things, but I will not look at these things. I will not look out the window. I will not acknowledge this. I will not do anything with this. It's a contradiction. It's a paradox almost. They're a small town community where everybody knows each other, and that makes them less connected than they would have been otherwise.
Yeah, I mean that's really, so it's almost not quite the opposite, but a very different read in the sense that they're turning inward, which is only making them more isolated. And this is sort of because of their ongoing refusal to face up to the evil that exists and indeed always has existed around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like that a lot. Yeah. It's really interesting. Cool.
It's weird how like things in your life just like I've been thinking about this book nonstop for like a month, and then I see a Catholic priest and immediately my brain goes, huh.
Yeah.
And starts thinking about things.
Yeah. Yeah. That is true. I actually saw a Catholic priest walking on the street the other day, and I was like, okay, how often does that happen? This is maybe like 2 weeks ago. But anyway, it was like, yeah, I haven't seen a Catholic priest in real life in years, and there's one right there. It's a sign, Scott.
It is. You should have asked him how he feels about vampires.
Yeah. Should have darkly implied that maybe I had a vampire problem and needed his advice.
Yeah. Father, what is the church's official stance on vampires?
Yeah.
Asking for a friend.
Kind of curious, actually.
Yeah, I actually am too. What would he actually reply?
Yeah,
he'd probably just tell me to fuck off or something less vulgar. But
Scott, you just
I'm just putting fuck in the mouths of all this
of stuff. all these figures who would probably not use that word. And if anybody knows what the Catholic Church's actual stance on vampires is, I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we cut back to Callahan for one last time as he rides out of the story and onto the highways that will rule his life before the man in black drops him back onto our path of the beam. He's on a bus to New York, and all he wants to do, Matt, is drink. Something cheap, Callahan thought. Something that will burn the tongue and sizzle the throat. Something to take away the bland, sweet taste, or at least allay it until he could find a place to begin drinking in earnest. To drink and drink and drink.
Yeah, like you said, it would be a curse worse than death to be cursed this way if we didn't know the twists and turns past this point.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, somebody who reads this book with no knowledge of the Dark Tower is going to have a really different impression of where Callahan goes from here. Like if you didn't know, you're thinking to yourself, maybe he becomes a full vampire like Barlow.
Sure.
It just, I don't know if we're going to see him again. I kind of don't think we are, based on my understanding from the Dark Tower. But I don't know. I just thought it was interesting to consider, like, what would the reader's impression be if they didn't actually know where this character goes from here?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's definitely not a positive note we leave him on here, one way or the other. He's not going to have a good time.
Yeah.
But it is the morning now. The daylight is back. And in that daylight, we have safety. I love this line here. Jimmy looked out the window and said, "Daylight," the way a miser might say money. I really love that.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
They briefly talk about if Matt Burke will be okay. He's really drained himself from exerting himself after this heart attack he had. And also, Barlow is trying to send people to kill him. So they're really concerned about Matt Burke, but he's seemingly not concerned about himself at all. Yeah.
I think that he just thinks that what he's doing is so important that it doesn't matter if he uses himself up and dies. That's kind of my take on his character anyway.
Yeah, he's willing to get tried for murder. I think he's not worried about anything at this point except killing vamps.
Right. Saving the town. Yeah.
Yes, saving the town. His precious town, the only one that still cares about the town.
Mm-hmm.
I love this moment where they drive back into that very town and immediately feel how bad it's become. It's gone bad, Jimmy said. His boyish face looked pale and frightened and angry. Christ, you can almost smell it. And you could, Ben thought, although the smell was mental rather than physical. A psychic whiff of tombs.
Love it.
I love it so much. I don't have anything to say. I just really love it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this whole bit of the story really has this remarkable tone that is, very in keeping with that idea. The idea that the quartet is moving around this town, which is not quite dead yet, but certainly dying. And there's this pervasive sense of creepy desolation. And yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I guess you could call a tone a kind of mental smell.
Yeah.
I really think it's one of my favorite parts of the book in a way, like just the feeling, the unsettling feeling of it is really striking.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think King really nails, like, you can kind of almost see this. It's this beautiful morning, and yet the town is dead. There's like no one out. There's no one around. I think they see like one person is in the diner, the owner, but no one else is in there. It's just everything's dead.
Right, and that just kind of accents everything else that's missing.
Yeah, definitely. But before they head over to the Petries to whittle down some steaks, they stop by the antique store just, to check to see if like the most obvious place for Barlow to be is just the place that he actually is. And this is when Ben sees a long crate with a hand sticking out of it in the showroom, and he loses his fucking mind, and he jumps on it and he punches it open, like making his hands bloody because he's so anxious to get Barlow. I think, to kind of circle back around to your concern about this whole thing, this certainly seems to indicate that that's what King wants you to feel. He is so kind of blinded by this opportunity that he throws any and all caution to the wind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly right. Like it's we're supposed to be worried that these vampire hunters that we're relying on to save everyone are basically compromised. And I think this whole chapter or this whole section or whatever is devoted to showing like this is if anything, they just get worse and worse as this goes on.
Yeah, I mean, if our characters are playing a game of chess with a master of chess who's played this game many, many, many times before, it doesn't seem like they're like really really making good moves right now.
No.
Do they have like they're not thinking, how many moves ahead are they thinking right now? How many moves ahead is Barlow thinking?
Yeah, exactly. I think Barlow has them right where he wants them.
Mm-hmm. So they get to the Petries, and poor Mark cannot go inside to see his parents. But the two adults go in and confirm that, yes, his parents are dead and Callahan is missing. They cover the parents up, and they get to work in the Petrie basement lathing some steaks. And this is when they kind of just do what you and I have been talking about, which is how the hell is this going to work?
Yeah.
It's going to be weeks before we get them all, if we ever do. Can you stand that? Can you stand doing what you did to Susan 1,000 times, pulling them out of their closets and their stinking little bolt holes, screaming and struggling, only to pound a stake in their chest cavities and smash their hearts? Can you keep that up till November without going nuts? And so they get into a shouting match with each other, and then they realize they're shouting at each other, and so the argument just ends. But they don't resolve anything here. Like the plan here isn't actually resolved. It's just as how do we do this as it ever was.
Right. They verbalized the fact that this isn't going to work, but they're no closer to figuring out a solution that will work, which I think just makes us even more desperate for them to find Barlow.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, their whole plan here is basically, okay, Cody and Mark are going to go around town and like find the vampires and like make marks on the doors where the vampires are at, while Ben is lathing up some stakes. And so they're not actually going to slay any vampires today. Yeah. Is basically what they're resigned to. Like, I think Matt Burke sent them out thinking, okay, they're going to like make a bunch of stakes in the morning, and they're going to spend like every hour until sundown, and they'll get like maybe they'll get like 50 today, and then tomorrow they'll get, and they're going to go back to Burke and be like, no, we didn't kill any.
Yeah. This is like you took your turn in a chess match to like move one of your pawns forward because it would make the board more symmetric or something.
Yeah.
Instead of like actually advancing anything or capturing any of the pieces that you could have captured. I mean, and we talked about this before, how like the spread is basically exponential. So not killing vampires, giving them a whole other night to work is all. It's like it's over now. It's fucking over.
I mean, we were told when King kind of zoomed out a little bit that the only humans are left are the ones that don't have loved ones in the area, and that's literally just because like there's no reason to let anyone in, so they're like safe in their houses for now because there's no one coming over and asking to be let in. But like that's not going to hold up forever. So yeah, like it's already over. It's already over.
Yeah,
they can't save the town, and that's something that Matt Burke quite hasn't realized yet.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, for as smart as he is, he's not. And maybe it's because they didn't even realize this, but yeah, I think they didn't realize that he is, or that rather they didn't realize the town is this far gone already. I think Matt literally might not realize that, and that's a big problem.
So Mark and Jimmy begin their day's work, first heading to the McDougal's trailer. They eventually find this poor family that we've circled around many times throughout this novel. They're all holed up in the crawl space under the trailer, mommy, daddy, and poor abused baby. They try to use the sunlight to kill Roy McDougal, as like, maybe we don't have to stake all 300. Maybe we'll just pull him out in the sun. And we're treated to this horrifying scene. What follows was almost unbearable. Roy McDougal began to writhe as soon as the light struck him, like a man who had been disturbed in sleep. Steam and moisture came from his pores, and the skin underwent a slight sagging and yellowing. Eyeballs rolled behind the thin skin of his closed lids. His feet kicked slowly and dreamily in the wet leaves, his upper lip curled back, showing upper incisors like those of a large dog, a German shepherd or a collie. His arms thrashed slowly, the hands clenching and unclenching, and when one of them brushed Mark's shirt, he jerked back with a disgusting cry. And then he crawls back while screaming and writhing under the protection of the shadows.
Oh my God. Yeah. And I love how after this happens, they just leave.
Yeah.
Like it's such a realistic reaction because, I mean, it's funny because like we still don't even know if that would actually kill the vampire. Like they didn't really succeed in their experiment.
Yeah. I mean, presumably given enough time, but like, it's not like so much of vampire lore has like sunlight hits them, turn to dust, you know, like burn up, turn to dust.
But like, you know, if you were in a video game, then you pull a vampire out and then you like tie them up out in the open and you see how long it takes them to die. But like in real life, you're just like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. And you just leave because you can't handle it.
I mean, it's just, there's no easy way to do this is basically what we're being showed here. Like this is going to be arduous and horrifying and disgusting no matter which way. They don't turn to dust when you stab them. They don't turn to dust when you expose them to sunlight. There's no easy trick. There's no like multi-kill going on here that's going to make this like an easy thing to do. It's going to be like rooting out evil. I think if we return to the metaphor is an arduous task that is not easy. Yeah. And even
when you're doing the right thing, it's still ugly. They need those UV bombs from Blade 2. That's what they need.
Would that even work in this? I don't know. I don't think it would.
Make him more powerful.
Sure.
Get Whistler on it.
Okay. As they make their way to the next trailer, Jimmy Cody sees a mess of kids' toys, including a tiny pool table. And he manages to put our blue chalk clue together at last. Of course, pool. That's where Barlow must be. The bar.
Barlow. Stupid jokes aside, I love that the vampire chooses to hole up in the place where the people go to get their banal evil drug, the drug that has been the forefront of the story that so many characters have had problems with, the drug that has, I think, maybe rotted the town in a small way, but a small but pervasive way, and in several cases I think made our characters vulnerable.
Sure.
So I don't know, I just thought it was great that it's the bar. Like it's not just like it's not random that it's the bar, right? It kind of makes sense that it'll be the bar thematically.
So I've got a question for you then. What's going to happen next? This is the end of our reading. What's going to happen next?
They're gonna go kill him.
They're going to head to the bar. He's going to be there and they're going to slay him. The end.
So it's interesting because I know that I have my tinfoil chocolate hat on, but I'm wondering if this is like a red herring, like they're going to go to the bar, but it's a trap. But I don't know if we have enough like pages left for that. So I think they might go to the bar, kill him. Jimmy dies in the process.
Why does Jimmy die? Why are you killing Jimmy?
Because Barlow kills him, man. I don't know. Somehow, and then, like, that's the thing is certain things sort of have to happen to get us to where I know the ending is, or the prologue, I should say. And I'm just trying to connect those dots, and I'm doing it in the most lazy and efficient way possible.
All right.
But I don't really have a good guess. I mean, my guess is that they're going to kill Barlow and then leave the town for dead. And then I think that the other Quartet members are going to be dead, and that's why they're not with Ben and Mark.
Okay. Well, we will find out next week, because next week we are going to finish this book. This is it. We're at the end.
Awesome. I'm so excited.
So we're going to finish up chapter 14. We are also going to read chapter 15, because I was wrong when I said 14 was the last one. There is actually a chapter 15, Matt. I just forgot about that. It's a pretty short chapter. And then there's also an epilogue. So
all right.
So everyone out there, just read until the book is over, or listen until the book is over.
All right. I can do that.
All right. Now we're going to get into our discussion question from last week. Matt, our discussion question was, what are your thoughts on Susan Norton and her role in the novel? And as I hinted at earlier in the show, people have some opinions, and they're pretty unkind to poor Susan Norton, or maybe better to say to Stephen King.
I'm scrolling down. These are some long answers. These are unusually long answers. I think people have a lot to get off their chest.
Yes.
All right, so let's get into it. First, from Pear Jane, we have, I've always been a bit conflicted about Susan's role in the book. On the surface, she seems like a victim of fridging, which is the trope of when the male protagonist's love interest dies tragically so that he can be motivated to exact justice or find his purpose. Usually such characters are one-dimensional, feminine ideals whose existence is purely to serve the protagonist's journey. But Stephen King's characterization goes far deeper than that. Susan wants to leave town, but also takes great comfort in its familiarity. Consciously, she believes that she wants to seek the great unknown, but her feelings for Ben spring directly from that desire. And her feelings from Ben spring directly from that desire, but unconsciously, she still clings to what she understands. She's the town's avatar in the quartet, and every supernatural fighting gang needs someone to question their crazy assertions. The problem, of course, is that she's a woman only just beginning to understand herself, and she's surrounded by men who are utterly comfortable with their authority. Consider Ben's fame and condescending nostalgia for the town, Matt's professorial arrogance, Jimmy's and Callahan's paternalistic roles of rational doctor and godly father. Susan's unsure of the strength of her own voice and smitten with Ben's interest in her, and is constantly shut down by the other men of the quartet. Don't go to the authorities, of course it's a vampire, etc. Her only equal as a teammate is Mark, and he's a child. But in his way, his authority is also greater than hers because his convictions are absolute. I imagine that originally her character was conceived as a way to deepen Ben's journey and echo the loss of his wife, and she could have been no more than that. But she's also an avatar of a woman trying to gain agency in the 1970s small-town America. She's regarded as pretty enough and bright, how I hate that word, but not really worth taking seriously. And gosh, when she doesn't listen to the men, look what happens. She gets herself killed. Of course, if the men had taken her more seriously and had included her more as an equal in the group, maybe she wouldn't have exercised her agency in the only way she could. In either case, she gets full marks for bravery.
I really love this answer. And I think that the one thing about Susan that I was having trouble connecting that I think Pear Jane did a fantastic job was the idea of her being the person who wants to escape the town and can't, and the doubting Thomas of the group. And I think Pear Jane has combined those things perfectly as this woman who really, really wants to escape, but also wants the comfort of the known of the town. Like this contradiction at the core of her, that she wants to be the person that gets out, but she also doesn't at the same time.
Yeah. Right. I think her arc is sort of left frustratingly I should say frustratingly truncated, because you feel like she has all this momentum toward the future, and then it's just like one bad decision basically, and her story ends. But no, I like this answer as well. I feel like it articulates a lot of the complex things that are going on that I was having trouble nailing down. Like I really like the idea that it's like it's the men's inability to sort of take her seriously as a full team member that leads her to just be like, fuck you guys, I'm gonna go deal with this myself, which is a very bad decision, but in a certain sense they drove her to that. Yeah.
I mean, she was not included. Like we said, like the quartet got together and everyone was given a role in their plan going forward. No one gave Susan anything to do, and no one called Susan. Like Ben comes back, and does he call Susan? Does he let her know what happened? Does he check? No. So I think Pear Jane is on here that like their denial of her forced her to exert herself in the only way she could, which is, I mean, echoed perfectly by her conflict with her mother, which is like her desire to escape the town was fostered by the oppressive, smothering love of her parents and their desire to control her.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm reading that slap now as a sort of metaphorical slap, where it's like the reason she strikes her mom, which is sort of an uncharacteristic thing for her to do, is she feels like, you've left me no other way of expressing myself. You've left me, you hemmed me in and left me no other choice other than something that is sort of objectively stupid, which is to, hit your mom in the face. Like, it's not going to, that's never in the history of the world has that resulted in a positive outcome. And then, later she sort of has to, she makes another ultimately bad sort of reactive thrashing decision.
She tries to slap the Marston house. Never a good idea.
Slap the Marston house. Don't do that. Don't slap a house.
There we go. Kingslingers lesson of the day: do not slap a house.
Yep.
All right, next we have Bricks, who says, I've honestly never been a huge fan of the way Susan is being portrayed in this book. To me, it seems like King was unsure of which direction to take her, so she ends up feeling a bit schizophrenic. In one moment, seemingly believing everything, and in the next, being dumb about the whole vampire situation. We never get a good feel for her motives. Why is she drawn to Ben? Is it actual love? Is it spite to her mother? Or is it something else just completely? What happened to her and Floyd? The way that meeting Ben has been made to just draw a line in the sand and start a new life. Basically annoying her old Floyd, I think. Floyd out of nowhere. Is she heartless, or did she just not think her relationship was as important as Floyd did? Not that Floyd's a particularly good guy either. For me, Salem's Lot is a book I enjoyed in spite of Ben and Susan. Matt, Callahan, Mark, and Straker is an awesomely horrible person. Carry this book for me, not the main characters.
Yeah, Straker's the best. Yeah, sure. There were a few moments where her motivations do seem to, like, it seems like she's you're like, oh, okay, she's finally got it. And then it's like, nah, she lost it. Damn it.
Yeah.
It's a bit frustrating. I mean, I think it's intentional, but it is frustrating. All right. Next from ALH84001. I just want to sit down King and ask him, Steve, old buddy, old Palorino, real talk now. What in the hell did a woman named Susan ever do in your past? Between Susan Delgado being burned alive, Susanna horrifically losing her legs, hell, losing Eddie as well, and Susan Norton's gruesome fate, it seems like he's got some kind of vendetta with a person named Susan, Susie, Susanna, or Sue. Are there more examples, constant readers? I'm not as well read as some of you. There have to be, right? Maybe we'll find out as this season of Kingslingers progresses. It's pretty funny. I have the same questions, ALH411.
I have no comment.
This is going to be fun.
Baby Can You Dig Your Sam says, Susan is certainly not one of King's stronger female characters, but having grown up in rural America, I feel like I understand her. The most important quality about Susan is that she is small town provincial. She's never been anywhere, never had any worldly experience, never experienced trauma or tragedy. Her life is mundane and she yearns for something more, but has yet to experience it. I feel like this is why she can't conceive of the supernatural. To her, nothing that interesting could ever happen in the lot. Contrast that with the other members of the quartet. Both Ben and Mark are outsiders, only recently moved to the lot. Father Callahan and James Cody, although perhaps lifelong lot residents, are more mature in their experiences. Father Callahan knows the town's dirty secrets, the small evils that the residents do to each other, and he exists within his own private existential crisis. As a doctor, Cody's job is to fight death, and he has seen the hidden malignancies that grow with the townspeople. Some to be overcome with modern medicine, others to lead to certain death. Susan's naivete and inability to truly grasp what the world beyond her town is her downfall. Couple that with her predominantly male quartet's dismissive attitudes towards her questioning of their authority, and it's a recipe for her doom. It makes me wonder what would have happened if she had moved to New York. Would she have been able to broaden her horizons and embrace such a different way of life? Or would she have been overwhelmed, frightened by the anonymity of the place and noise and geographical claustrophobia of living on top of one another, only to turn tail and head back home? Thanks to Barlow, we'll never know the answer.
Yeah, I like
that answer a lot. Yeah.
It reminds me of the way that she just instinctively defers to the authority of the 10-year-old child in a way that both seems in keeping with her character, but also makes you think like, okay, this is definitely just like a trait of hers, is she's incapable of kind of standing up to people.
Yeah. And I think there's a fun conversation to be had. Is this Stephen King's inherent biases coming through? Or is this intentional choices that he made to construct a character this way? Our answer at Doof Media is always the latter, because we like it that way. Yeah. But there's certainly a conversation to be had.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the writer is permitted to have a character be a bad character in the sense of like they kind of suck, and that's not like a reflection on what they think about women, for example.
Sure.
But I think everyone's kind of on the same page there, actually. So we'll move on. Abe Lincoln Ballsack says,
Abe Lincoln's Ballsack. Possessive.
Sorry. I'll be honest. When I heard this week's question, my immediate thought was, Susan, she's all right. I don't think she got developed like a lot more seasoned King would have done. Aside from thinking the Susan name matching Susan Delgado was interesting, she almost seems like as much of a main character as the humpback in The Dump. Salem's lot is the shit. I'm glad we're reading it, but Susan is meh for me.
Seeing a theme here, Matt. Yeah, seeing a theme.
This is damning with meh praise.
With no praise.
No praise whatsoever. Yeah.
Domnambulus says, I'm convinced that Ben frees Susan and grants her a last wish to leave town. As he has focused only on himself and his helpfulness comes much too late, there is only one possible way out for her: dead. Her sudden death contradicts my Persephone prediction from a few weeks ago. Something bad happened to her, yes, but I did not expect that her staking would be first blood, and I was awaiting a more extensive battle between life and death. To use musical terms, it's a phenomenal drop, an abrupt change in the energy level, even if this one is unpleasing because we lose a character who feels not completed yet. Sadly, the effect works even better. Susan gets a second chance in the Dark Tower, the series about second chances. There, she is also a young and naive woman who falls in love with a stranger who does not return her love on equal terms. Other parallels are the conflict with her mom and aunt, being promised to someone without her will and turning against her town. However, King adds many more facets to her newer character. Susan Delgado's role is much more active. She actually drives the plot by killing the sheriff and supporting Roland in any possible way. Both Susans are stubborn, full of energy, and have their hearts in the right place. In Susan Norton's case, we are graced with a proof, which is a pitiful combination that in the end leads to their tragedy. Because of their egoism, Ben and Roland are complicit in the deaths and are both forced to watch the cruel last moments. Let's see if Ben learns quicker than Roland to cry off his tower. I like that. I like comparing her more directly with Susan Delgado here at the end.
Yeah, I really love the idea of thinking of Susan Delgado as like a second chance for this kind of character archetype, if you will.
Yeah.
And I just have to, mention again, like I think I talked about this before, but like I am still surprised that we never got a final reckoning. We never got like Vampire Susan speaking to Ben and some final twist of the knife. It was. It's one of the things that makes her arc feel truncated is we didn't even get that kind of resolution. I just
don't know how you can resist that scene. It just seems like that scene would write itself.
Exactly.
Like it's one thing to make him have to kill her, but like to experience her that way first is another whole thing.
I would have bet money that we were going to do that, but
yeah.
All right. Jennifer D says, "Ugh, I can't stand Susan Norton." She stays in a long-term relationship with Floyd out of what? Boredom, fear of being alone, free steak dinner on Fridays. She then drops him in a flash and doesn't even tell him he's dropped when she meets Ben. She then instantly lets Ben tell her what to do and how to live her life. This might not be such a bad plan because as soon as she's left to her own devices, she stalks a vampire alone in his lair right before sunset with a flimsy snow stake. What the fuck, Susan? The only person who confronts her on her shit show of a life is her mother, who she then persecutes as a meddling bitch. Salem's Lot has long been my least favorite Stephen King book, and I think Susan is one of the reasons. I'm reading along with you in the hopes of finding a place in my heart for this book, and I'm really, really trying here. Well, we appreciate you trying, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the book. I'm sorry sorry if you're not. But definitely, I kind of feel you here though. This is great.
I definitely feel everyone here, and I think, asking this question was a way of having this conversation without like leading you, Matt. Like I wanted you to come to your own conclusions about Susan. I didn't want to have you listen to me bitch about her for 10 weeks before you came to your own conclusion. But yeah, I agree with basically every sentiment that's been given here. She's not great.
I think I just don't care about her really. Like, I was like, oh, and now she's dead. Oh, well,
And I mean, the weird thing is there are people that look at Wizard and Glass and make similar complaints about Susan Delgado. I don't agree with them. I think Susan Delgado is a fantastic character who's complex and interesting and layered and does have agency in that book and does a lot of different things. And I love her to death. And I think it is the comparison that almost makes the weakness of Susan Norton here.
Yeah.
Because the death of Susan Delgado is like one of the most powerful, horrifying, heartbreaking moments of the entire Dark Tower trilogy, a series that has so many heartbreaking moments in it. Yeah. And while Susan Norton's death is horrifying in that King does, I think, a very, very good job of showing the horror of having to kill a vampire is not this nice, neat thing. It is this very personal, violent, messy affair. There's no real I don't think you feel Ben's grief and heartache in that moment. Like you're horrified that he had to do it, but just when Susan Delgado dies, it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart for her. It breaks your heart for Roland, and you just don't feel that here.
Susan Delgado is facing such an impossible situation. Like her life is such a tragedy, even before Roland arrives, and she latches onto Roland partially because he's maybe the only possibility she has of getting out of this nightmare that her life is. Whereas, Susan Norton has no such excuses. That makes us just kind of, and also I think this book doesn't convince me that Ben loves her. And actually, I don't think he does. I don't think I'm just King failed to make us think. I just think King has repeatedly shown that he's totally preoccupied and he kind of thinks it's cool that she likes him and he gets to have sex with her, but he's not that into her. I think the text is explicit about this. And so you're right, when he has to kill her, it's not that it's a certain kind of grief that's believable, but it's not the sort of full-throated grief of Roland watching Susan Delgado die and breaking his mind basically. That's a much different scene to me.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. The question remains though, to what end? And that is a question that we will have to answer next week.
All right.
Because that's what we're doing next week. We are finishing Salem's Lot. And our question, since we talked this week about someone who is clearly a lot of your least favorite character in the book, our question for next week, now that we have reached the end of the book, is who is your favorite character in Salem's Lot and why? Is it Ben? Is it Susan? Do some of you love Susan out there? Please, if your favorite character is Susan, please respond to this question because I would love to hear why.
Yeah. I hope we get some weird answers.
Yeah. I hope someone says the bus driver.
Yeah. The Hunchback.
Yes. Dud. Yes.
Dud.
All right, so that is our question for this week, and that is going to do it for us here this week. Once again, next week we finish the book. Very, very exciting. So get reading, and then we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod at gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And of course, the subreddit r/doofmedia is the place to hang out and talk to other listeners.
And you should subscribe to Kingslingers because our schedule is in flux right now. We're doing a lot of cool, interesting things that we didn't originally plan to do in season 2. So everything's crazy. So make sure you don't miss any of it. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
Yeah. And if you like Kingslingers and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. Special thanks this week to new patrons, new doof dancer, Eddie, Dean, I assume, and new doof trooper, Ryan P. Welcome. We hope you enjoy the stuff we have at those reward tiers on the Patreon. We put a lot of work into it, and I think we make some good stuff over there. So
yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But of course, if you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. You can help us out by sharing this podcast hundreds of times. Share this podcast as many times as Ben has to lathe steaks alone in that basement all day.
Yeah.
Just poor Ben, just down there.
Yep. Just
running a lathe.
Grimly share as if preparing to kill vampires.
Okay, maybe not exactly like that. Or you can grimly leave us a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Patrick John McDonald, who gives us 5 stars and says, "Incredible. I'm incredibly saddened that I did not find this podcast sooner. I began listening as they released episode 60, but I've been devouring their content for weeks now. Even though I was not fortunate enough to read alongside them, the program is still a spectacular way to gain new insights and learn new things about an excellent series. It is by far my favorite piece of media surrounding the Dark Tower, and I'm incredibly grateful that they've shared their journey to the tower with the community." Wow, that's very nice, Patrick. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. That means a lot. I really appreciate that.
I got the big old smile on my face as I was reading it. So thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick. And thank you everyone else who has taken the time to send in those ratings and reviews. As we always say, they do indeed help. And finally, that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week to finish Salem's Lot. And don't forget, send in your Do the King Thing entries. I'm going to predict, you out there listening right now, I'm going to predict it's 2:33 in the afternoon, which means you have roughly, Matt, do some math for me. You have roughly
like
9.5 hours to submit your entry.
Yeah.
Man, if it is 2:33 when someone listens to this, they're going to like freak the fuck out. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's right. Sam.
Oh my God. What if their name is Sam? We need more listeners because it would increase the possibility of this happening.
Yeah. If we see, that's one reason to just get really, really big is then you can do stuff like this and just free people out.
Yeah. And in conclusion, thanks specifically to you, Jeff. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number, Sam.
Why do you keep going back to Sam?